Fantastic. Okay, so it's really lovely to be here with you, and I want to start by thanking Pen Green and the East Midlands Stronger Practice Hub for inviting me to join your fabulous relationships network. I just think that the name of that is just so enticing, and it's wonderful to have a space to be able to think and talk together about relationships. Now, some of you may know that Suzanne Zeedyk and I both spoke at the Pen Green conference last September, where we were invited to celebrate the work of the wonderful Professor Colwyn Trevarthen. And it was after that event, Suzanne and I were invited to join you to talk about why relationships matter so much in young children's lives and learning. And I was really disappointed not to be able to join you for the first session with Suzanne. And then, of course, my session last month had to be rescheduled because I was unwell. So thank you for your patience, and please accept my apologies for being away. I had a really unpleasant upper respiratory infection, which has left me with a slight residual cough, but I do have a bottle of water here. So if I go into a coughing fit, don't worry, I've got some water and I'll just keep going. But what I'm hoping to do this evening is add the key messages that Suzanne shared with you and bring in some of my own thinking. But what I'm really looking forward to is hearing from you about your work with young children and about whether you feel my idea of professional love still has a place in early years practice today, especially given the many challenges the sector is facing. So you might have seen this slide before, and I make no apology for it, because actually feeling safe and secure and loved is really important for children. And informed by theory and research on attachment, we're all too aware that humans are social beings by nature, and that we seek connection to one another from the day we are born. And we know from research and experience that children are very capable and eager to learn, but only when they feel reassured that they are safe, secure and loved. Yet it seems to me that the political agenda seems to be focused on this catch-up resilient narrative post COVID-19, which does not really take account of young children's emotional development. So relationships are at the heart of all early years practice. And when early years practitioners properly tune into the unique needs of babies, toddlers and young children, only then will they be able to authentically support children to learn. And early years practitioners are role models, and in these roles they are the embodiment of professionalism in practice. And it is to them that young children turn in times of distress, but also to celebrate flourishing and fulfillment, whatever their socio-cultural context. And it's not any wonder really that professional work with young children is frequently referred to as a labour of love. You may be familiar with Bowlby's claim that the availability of the adult must be reliable and consistent for the child to feel safe and secure. And we can conclude that most important is that a young child knows that a significant adult returns when the child needs them. Children with secure human attachments will call upon their internal working model to decide that their special adult will return and that they can predict their arrival. So when a child is distressed, but they have a secure attachment relationship with their key adult that they can rely on, then they know that this person is a source of comfort when the child is upset and in need of reassurance. So I argue that both parents and practitioners need to understand about infants' internal working models in order to provide the conditions for babies and young children to feel safe, secure, loved, and predisposed to learn. And if a child's bids for attention are ignored, then the child would suffer emotionally. Secure attachments are vital to young children's ability to be able to manage their own feelings and to cope without their parent. Nonetheless, these relationships are not created overnight, and as I've already said, they take time to develop. Time that may be in short supply when there are so many other roles the practitioner must fulfill. I have long argued that close, intimate and trusting relationships are essential to the well-being of every one of us, and that human beings deprived of the company of other human beings that they like and love will suffer. And the development of close and safe relationships is never more important than for young children who spend their time in daycare, away from their own homes and parents. However, it is important to highlight the contested nature of attachment-based relationships between paid early years professionals and young children. Now, in recent years, there has been more research carried out around the notion of love. And so research into these complex issues has gained quite a lot of traction in the field of early years care and education. And contemporary international scholars have been theorising the place of love in early years and really thinking about what that means. You know, quite big international studies, in fact, but really thinking about that against the backdrop of increased staff and parent anxiety about the appropriateness of close, intimate attachment relationships between adults and young children in professional roles. This brings me on to this point about anxieties about love. Building effective and meaningful pedagogical relationships with children and families is at the heart of all early years practice. And as I've already said, young children who spend time away from their own families are reliant on their adult caregivers excuse me, to provide a physically and emotionally secure environment for them to be able to develop and learn. The love, care and intimate affection, which is essential to the security and disposition of infants and toddlers to learn, has been overshadowed by an unease surrounding the possibility of false accusations of child abuse, which have begun to infiltrate the early years workforce. The prevalence of this moral panic is situated within the context of the recent spate of child abuse convictions, particularly the case of the two women who were convicted of abusing babies in a nursery in southwest England in 2010, which was reported extensively in the media. And earlier this year, the shocking case of Nathan Bennett, who abused toddlers in his care, and it was only yesterday that he was sentenced to 30 years in prison for his heinous crimes. And in the report by the BBC, they said that Nathan Bennett was convicted of multiple accounts of sexual abuse, including 2 counts of rape against 5 boys. And these children were toddlers. So undoubtedly, these deplorable crimes make sobering reading. Worryingly, however, available guidance for early years professionals on how to appropriately meet the attachment needs of infants and young children is lacking. I have argued, therefore, that young children are at risk of being denied the opportunity to become closely attached to their key person and are at danger of being kept at arm's length by well-meaning but anxious caregivers who are fearful of being accused of wrongdoing. When I first suggested that infants and toddlers and young children need love, this seemed to be at a time when love was not talked about in professional early years work, because of a lot of these concerns around anxieties. And in some ways, that debate has continued and of late, with these particularly heinous crimes, has started to become more of a concern. So at the time when I was starting to research in this area, to facilitate the debate, I started to think about this and conceptualize the idea of professional love. The point here is that the caveat to this professional love is that it is the adults who really know, understand, and are secure in their reciprocal relationships with the babies and children for whom they are responsible, do so with the rights of the child fully and wholly embedded in their practice and at the centre of every aspect of their work, with what I've called the permission from the parent. Not written permission in the way that you would ask for written permission for other aspects of policies and procedures, but a permission that it comes from regular contact with the parents, discussion with parents, and something that really builds that relationship so that everybody is aware of what those roles are. But what actually is professional love then? Well, the two main theorists who have influenced my thinking are Nell Noddings on caring relations and John Bowlby and also Mary Ainsworth on attachment theory. Back in my days as an early years practitioner, and later confirmed in my PhD research, I found that parents, usually mothers, place a great deal of importance on having practitioners in early years settings who love their children, especially the babies and toddlers, This is why I introduced the notion of professional love, the love of a practitioner for a child in his or her or their care with the permission of the parent. So perhaps this is a good time to say that the concept of professional love does actually belong to me. Sometimes people use the term in other contexts, but the way that I've described it, that term and that concept belongs to me. So should you find that it chimes with your ideas, or if you wish to critique it, which I welcome, I'd be really grateful if you could always reference the phrase and the concept of professional love in the way that I've described it back to me. But it is a complex construction because there are many instances where aspects of love and intimacy and care are overlapping, and they cannot be compartmentalized, which is why it is difficult to distinguish these one from another within actual professional early years practices in any tangible way. The role of early years professionals is absolutely critical in maintaining close relationships with children. And it is my firm belief that early years practitioners in the role of the key person are well placed to implement confident and appropriate intimacy practice within a reflective and reflexive framework of support. Yet I am well aware that this is easier said than done. Distinguishing between family love and professional love can be partially understood through engaging with Nodding's caring relations theory, which takes the view that caring relations are not a set of behaviours which come with a prescribed way of behaving, but rather that ethical caring is about enacting with thought as well as with feeling. Noddings claims that for someone to act with ethical care, it is to be compelled to care, but that there is a choice involved, which she insists is different from innate caring, which is based largely on intuition and fits more readily with family care. The idea that caring involves being in tune with the one in need of caring, i.e. the child, according to Noddings, involves the practitioner being in reception with the child, and she calls this motivational displacement. It is the practitioner's ability to decenter, so in other words, to forego their opinion and to imagine being as if in the position of the child, which I believe fits entirely into the context of early years practice, and in particular when working with our youngest children, those babies and toddlers. Nodding's theory underpins the development of my notion of professional love, that when they're able to decenter and form an authentic, enduring and close relational attachment to a young child with the permission from the parent, then this model of caring can be construed as a form of professionally loving practice. The challenge, however, for early years professionals is to know how to provide an appropriate love to babies and young children without fear of being accused of wrongdoing. Noddings argues that the notion and the ethics of caring relate to an approach whereby the experience of having been cared for leaves a memory which can later be used by that person in order to give care themselves, fitting with Bowlby's internal working model. She also suggests that it is not the consequences of the act of caring, but what comes first, what precedes the act of caring, the motivational displacement, which is of most importance. So in early years, the practitioner needs not only to have experienced being cared for, but also to have been loved. Of equal importance, the practitioner must be able to shift their thinking in order to intellectualize the experience as a loving, caring encounter, what I'm here calling professional love. So my claim is that when the key person in an early years setting possesses both the intellectual capacity and the emotional resilience to understand the complexity of human relations in line with the thinking developed by Bowlby on attachment theory and Nodding's ethic of care, then they are more likely to be better equipped to offer a suitable professional attachment relationship with babies and toddlers. And it is this relationship which I have termed professional love. Yet the individual practitioner alone cannot be tasked with developing professional love. It requires a whole-setting approach. So when we think about love in policy, When we turn to the EYFS with its 4 overarching principles, it includes the principle that children learn to be strong and independent through positive relationships. Importantly, excuse me, there is a mandate for children to be allocated a key person, and that the key person must help ensure that every child's learning and care is tailored to meet their individual needs. Yet in an earlier study I conducted with Peter Alpha, findings suggested that how early years settings implement the role of the key person is challenging for practitioners because it is interpreted at individual setting level, and as such it is subject to criticism in relation to meeting children's individual needs. The DFE guidance material to the EYFS are helpful to a point, but I'm not convinced that they go far enough in helping early years practitioners to know how to develop high quality relationships with young children and their families. I've selected these quotes from the DFE guidance, and the word loving only appears once in this set of materials, and yet there is an expectation that practitioners know how to make appropriate attachment relationships, when in reality, forming and maintaining these relationships are not easy and can be fraught with challenge and dilemma. The to 5 coalition guidance material do refer to love and appropriately references professional love to me. This set of guidance goes further than development matters, as it suggests that practitioners need professional support to be able to reflect on their feelings and actions. And reflection is one of the key characteristics of my work on professional love, as I will show later. And many of you will know that the coalition are actually revising the Birth to 5 Matters guidance as we speak. So it'll be interesting to see where those changes are made. But who gives permission when we talk about this professional love? Whose voice is heard? So let's have a think about that in practice. So we've got the child, we've got the parent, and we've got the practitioner. And I talk about that permission, and yet it needs to be unwritten. You can't ask a parent when they join your setting, is it okay if I love your child? It seems a ludicrous question. And yet it's something that those relationships we build, we need to think about what that looks like. How do we know whether it's appropriate? And how do we know if we've got permission from the parent and also, importantly, from the child? So it's vital that we listen to the voices of all those people that are involved in those decisions. As we start to think about what really does love look like in practice? Do you call it love? Do you call it caring? Some people call it unconditional positive regard, which I found quite a mouthful, but it depends on who you're speaking to and how they really think about what that looks like in practice. Is it caring? Is it love? And I would argue that in many cases that I have seen of those relationships forming and enduring, there are elements of professional love in practice. And I'm really keen to hear what you've got to say. But I wonder, when we think about who gives that permission, whose voice is heard, and who has to make sacrifices. So we have a responsibility. Obviously, we have a responsibility to children, and we have a responsibility to their parents and to ourselves and to the setting. So what I'm talking about here is professional responsibility, but actually professional love responsibility. And you'll all be really aware that there's been changes to the early years foundation stage this year, and particularly around safeguarding requirements. And these amendments are intended to better protect children from harm and to provide practitioners with clear guidance on what action to take if they're concerned about the welfare of a child. And I absolutely think these are the right ways forward. And it's vital that we have those clear guidance in place to ensure that children are always protected and that safeguarding is at the heart of everything that we do. And yet the same guidance is not available when we think about how do we form those relationships? How do we know if they're appropriate? And this is where I believe that the dialogue comes in. So let's think about what it means to inspect on love. Well, in their recent publication, Getting It Right from the Start, Ofsted cited the paper I referred to previously about the challenge for practitioners to cope with the emotional complexity of being in the key person role. And the key findings from their research suggested that practitioners know that the key person role is vital, and that they have seen many good examples of what that looks like. But actually, when they observed some arrangements, it was when it wasn't working well, was because the practitioners were lacking in understanding of the purpose of the key person role. So the key person, whether it is in a childminding setting or in a daycare setting, in a preschool setting, any type of group setting, it's absolutely vital. And as you know more than I do, because you're carrying out those roles every day, it comes in many forms, and it will be different with different children. We already know that building effective and meaningful pedagogical relationships with children and families is at the heart of early years practice. And in the absence of their parents, children who spend their time away from their families are reliant on those educators to provide that security for them. It stands to reason then that the key person plays a vital role in cementing the triangular relationship between themselves, the child, and the parent. And it is to the key person who the child will turn to throughout their days. But it is during these times of what I class as ordinariness that the key person will observe the child in minutiae. So the key person role must not be underestimated in supporting young children's emotional well-being, especially during moments of intimacy. So I've been thinking for a while now about what a prospectus for professional love would look like. And I've been asked about definitions and all sorts of ways in which I think this could be taken forward. So in my attempt to develop the prospectus, I felt that it was important to try to think about what this would look like in practice, because by not addressing these issues is to suggest that children are being denied the opportunity to be loved. So for me, it is this ability to decenter, to form this authentic, enduring and close relational attachment to a young child, but with that permission from the parent. I believe that it takes both the intellectual capacity and the emotional resilience, but I also believe that practitioners need a really good, strong support system from those leaders who are in their settings to be able to understand and to critique practice in a way that is supportive rather than accusatory. So I've been talking about this triangle of professional love because it invites deep reflection of interdependency, intimacy, and the value and nature of reciprocity in professional relationships. It attempts to address the potential conflict between demonstrating affection and adhering to safeguarding. It reframes love in a professional context, enabling educators to build trusting relationships while upholding professional boundaries. So my model attempts to distinguish professional love as complementary, not a replacement for a child's family relationships. It is an intellectual, reflective practice rather than a purely emotional one. And at the heart of the model is close observation. And this is a practice through which practitioners can interpret the unique needs of children by observing their individual communication style. And then the practitioner can interpret their specific needs and respond in an attuned and responsive way. This close attention allows practitioners to recognise when a child needs comfort, attention, or space, helping to build a secure professional attachment. And the predictable, secure attachment that develops from this practice is key for a child's brain development and their capacity for emotional regulation. Reflection is the key starting point for much of our early years work, and self-reflection is identified in the Birth to Five Matters Coalition guidance in relation to professional love, as I spoke about earlier. Self-reflection is integral to understanding all the steps within the triangle of professional love. So for the theory to be useful, I trialled it to determine its usefulness in practice with a group of committed practitioners who are familiar with the characteristics of professional love. The most difficult step in the implementation of the triangle is step 1. And I've highlighted in bold some of the words to emphasize the challenge that lies behind these terms, related to my earlier claims about practitioners having both the emotional resilience and the intellectual capacity to form appropriate, professionally loving relationships with young children. In that project, we spent a considerable amount of time pondering the place and process of self-reflection in early years practice. And as a step to becoming self-aware as one of the essential ingredients of professional love, especially where this related to getting to know ourselves. And together as a group, we agreed with Bassett's claim that by utilising the skills of self-reflection, it can lead us to be able to accept opportunities to avoid stagnation and strive for excellence. And it also provides an opportunity for innovative practice and provides the aid for supervision. It also provides an opportunity for us to be less judgmental, to avoid making assumptions about others, and for constructing professional knowledge through critical dialogue. It helps the development of professional skills, knowledge, and attitudes. So a little while ago, I led a project called Professional Love, the Dance of Reciprocity, with dance artist Liz Clark, who I'm sure that many of you, if you're involved with the Pen Green Centre, will know her. And in the 8-minute film of our project, it demonstrates how embodied movement helps reveal critical professional love moments and brings attention to the often overlooked value of love and care in early years practice. Overall, the film illustrates how professional love draws two people, the child and the practitioner, into a shared dance of reciprocity and emphasises connection, attunement, and mutual responsiveness, which is at the heart of all early childhood relationships. Now, I'm not going to show you this film this evening because I want to leave plenty of time for our discussion, but I have put a link to it in the slides, and also obviously Becky can send you the link as well. I'd really be interested in your feedback on the film and whether you think creative methods have a role to play in helping practitioners to implement professional love into their practice. Because part of the reason for creating this project in the first place was because people said to me, it's all very well to have this theory, Jools, but we don't know what that might look like in practice. And I was delighted and privileged to work with Liz, who is so skilled in her work in dance, that we then brought our ideas and our disciplines together and created this, this project. And the film was such a delight at the end of that as well. Sorry. So early years professionals don't know how to translate theory and policy about love and intimacy into their everyday practice. I think it not only renders them unable to confidently respond to accusations of wrongdoing, but it neglects the emotional needs of infants and toddlers, which I believe could be catastrophic for them. Defining love in professional roles is problematic. We know that because there is no skill set that can be applied, taught, or measured. It is the debate and theorization of love and care which is important, and providing opportunities for practitioners to discuss and reflect upon each other's viewpoint is likely to bring about a more thoughtful understanding and, crucially, a shift in their thinking. But I wonder what you think about that. As I draw the presentation to a close, I just want to highlight where you can find a little bit more information about professional love if you just want those bite-sized chunks. So I have got a little blog that you can find out about it if you wish to. If you haven't heard enough of me speaking already, I have carried out some podcasts, one with Early Excellence, one with Juno Sullivan from Leaf, and one that I carried out recently with Nursery World, which was about attachment theory, but naturally it draws on professional love as well. So I just want to thank you for listening, and I believe that working with and on behalf of other humans requires dedicated professionals. In my view, never has there been a more important time in society to advocate for babies, young children and families to be cared for and nurtured through the lens of professional love. But I'm really keen to know what you think, because you may disagree entirely. But thank you very much for listening, and here are some selected publications which you may want to have a look at, but I'll send the slides to Becky. Okay, thank you.